I was targeted by a sex predator when I was a single mom. I have been seeing a lot of conversation about the trophy wife woman who has made content about her sprinkle life. And she found out that the man that she married was abusing her children. Guys, subscribe to my channel and let's have a little chat.
If a man in public ever asks you for help, just say no, because there's no way that if a man genuinely needed help, the first person they would turn to is a woman.
A lot of women who become single mothers are actually pretty fucking desperate. If you have not already, please subscribe to my channel. I want to talk about this in a couple different layers. Okay. Now, if you haven't heard about this woman, she is like a trophy wife, and her content and everything that she makes is about her lifestyle, as like she found her sprinkle situation, right, with this man. She met him online on like some dating site. I think it was like eHarmony or something like that. And now that it's come out more and more aspects of this story, I want to first start by saying that a lot of single mothers are the worst pick me's that you will ever meet. Single moms are blamed for their situation, for being the lead of a fatherless home, not the men, right? When I was a single mother, I cannot tell you how much pressure other people in my family would put on me to get married because I had options. There were men who wanted to marry, who were willing to take me in despite the fact that I had this child or whatever, right? And that is kind of the message that so many single mothers, so we hear it now. Men constantly making it saying like, oh, you're devalued because you're a single mother. Men don't become devalued because they are single fathers, but these are different stories, particularly around this woman and why she was making this content. I think it was twofold. And a lot of people are talking about she married this old ass white man. She was after the bag. She had a bag. She was making over $90,000 a year. She was a single mom of two boys. And she still wanted some sort of validation. She's a beautiful woman. She still needed validation. And I think that's where this whole thing started, right? She wanted validation. Now, men, they do target women who are looking for that validation and looking to have a man, especially like if you're raising boys. Oh my God, I cannot tell you how many times I heard the comments that a woman can't raise a man. A woman can't raise a man. A woman can't. I raised an amazing man by myself. Okay. I really do not think that when we've set these ideas in our head that we've looked at the men around us. Most of them are not men that we want to fuck with. But again and again, women are told they can't do it on their own. And I think that can be true if you are somebody who is male centered, but that's a whole nother story. When I was raising my son and people were telling me this, I was young. I had him when I was 19 years old. So I really struggled with this. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe my ideologies aren't the right way. But I didn't see that many men around me that I wanted my son to become. I did not see that reflection. Now, she was making content that this man was idealistic. And a lot of content, when we start looking and breaking down the truths behind some of the content, they show aspects of a life that we all think we want to desire. And now you add onto this layer, especially with this woman, that she was in a interracial relationship, and it starts to also support that interracial relationship glow up that people are constantly trying to make you believe is universal, and it is not universal. So these things layered on, people are talking about that. But she was a pick me. She was not the sprinkle girl that Shira Seven would talk about. She was a pick me because we find out later that when she actually started this relationship with him, she asked to move into his house. She proposed to him and he agreed. And now she is suffering not only the consequences of being a pick me, her children are also suffering the consequences of her being a pick me. Because pick me mothers, pick me women are dangerous to their children and to everyone else. Now, she said she discovered this man was interfering with their daughter at 4 years old a few weeks, maybe a month or so ago, and she discovered this or whatever. 4 years old. They have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And when she took them to the hospital, it was discovered that he had been interfering also with the 2-year-old. So it's very likely that this 4-year-old was being abused for much longer than she just for a much longer time than was discovered. Because at 4 years old, if he's already messing with the 2-year-old, he has no, when maybe he started with the older one. So it's very likely her entire life she has been molested by her father, and very likely the 2-year-old as well. And it didn't seem like she had her sons from the previous relationship checked out at all. She has created a whole world where her children and her lifestyle and all of these things are a part of her income and a part of her popularity and a part of the reason people value her. And that's what so many single mothers are actually after, this social clout and value to say, I was chosen. And not only was I chosen despite being a single mother, but I was chosen and uplifted and taken care of and all of these things just to be brought down. And of course, her content's probably going to pivot into this lifestyle that she has to change and what she's going through and her children. Hopefully, she is going to focus on getting them therapy. So, like I said at the beginning of this video, I was actually also targeted by a sexual predator. However, I did not get in a relationship with that man. I found out that he was a sexual predator years later. But when I found that out, I realized that is probably why he targeted me. And now I didn't meet him online. It was someone that I knew. And this is the thing that we start talking about, the layers, right? He is not a sexual predator, and this didn't happen to her and her children because she met him online, because they moved too quickly. It happened because she was desperate and she didn't pay attention. And she pursued something that Shira 7 would never have suggested, proposing to a man. Are you serious? Asking to move into his house. But she wanted that validation, and she was thinking that this is the way she could get it by forcing her way into a situation. And he accepted it because he had a plan. And when these men, that whether you know them or not, because the truth is, most of the men that abuse children are close to them. They, I mean, this was their father. And it happens whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're white, whether you're, whatever. These men are out there. And I can't tell you how many stories I know of women getting involved with men, sometimes pastors and people in their churches, and turning a blind eye to what could be, they pretend they don't know, could be happening in their house. Because you start to question how are these children being governed? And the thing is their daddy. My children are alone with their father. That's his job too. And if I don't know how to pick someone to have my children with, then I am subject to their potential abuse. And a lot of these women know that these men are abusers, and they still bring them around their children. I'm not saying that was her situation, but she did say that there were lots of things that she ignored. And that ignorance is bliss situation absolutely always harms your children. So in my situation, I knew this guy from high school. Okay. We had went to high school together, and junior high school, maybe not all of high school. It was like junior high school more than high school. So junior high school. And I don't even remember right now how we reconnected in some kind of way. And he asked me out. And I was like, okay, kid from high school, sure, we can hang out, blah. And the thing about me is I'm a demanding type of person. And from the very beginning, I'm not impressed. My son never needed someone like to take him to Chuck E. Cheese or to an amusement park. We did all of those things. We like it. I mean, I made my own money and I had my own things. So I wasn't looking for financial types of come ups from a man. And technically, she shouldn't have been either. However, in my situation, I never introduced men to my children. I just didn't do that. And it had to be a very serious decision. It had to be a very like intentional thing for me to decide to introduce a man to my child. And I didn't know that right away. I'm going to be honest with you. I made that rule. I had a relationship with this guy that lasted maybe a year and a half, and he was terrible. And to me, right? But he had this whole family, and they were also welcoming to me, my son. And his mother was very involved with my son. And when I realized I needed to break up with this guy, I felt a certain kind of way about what I would be robbing my son of, right? These relationships, like this huge family, and all of these things. And I remember sitting in the car with my son, who was probably like 5 or 6 years old at the time. And, I had been struggling with this for a while. I wanted to get out of this relationship. And the only reason I tried to stay in the relationship, tried to make it work, was because I felt like I was going to be robbing him of this potential father figure and all of these things. Not even thinking about the fact that I didn't want my son to grow up and behave like this man, right? It was just like a man, which is what people always told you needed. But it was also these other people, his whole entire family, that would go dissolve if I ended this relationship, which actually didn't 100% happen. Because the guy's mom was still a sweetheart to my son for many years. But what ended up happening was I'm sitting in the car with my son, and I've been struggling with this thing. And I asked him, I said, how would you feel if this person was never around again, if we didn't see him anymore? And he said to me, and this was one of those things where I was just like, my child was wiser beyond his years. So he says to me, he was like, Mom, you seemed happier before you met him. That nigga had to go that day. I was like, oh my God, I was happier. And he had to go that day. And from that day on, I was like, I can't be having dudes around my son. I thought I was going to be in a relationship, and I was young. You know what I mean? Like I said, I was probably in my mid 20s by then. And it was probably the first relationship that I was trying to have as a mom and all of these things. Um, my son doesn't even remember that dude. He doesn't even remember him now. And I was just like, oh my God. But this man that I went to high school with, it never meshed. He never got to a point where he would have met my son. And I think that my level of expectation, my demands were probably far too much for him. Most single moms don't do that. They don't make demands. They don't have boundaries. They don't hold on to those boundaries when they feel like a man's trying to do the right thing by them. And I just wasn't that girl. I had to hold those boundaries because there was not going to be another in and out situation, even if it was a year or 2 years. Just no. You know what I mean? So um I wasn't, I just, yeah. So that layer of having boundaries as a single mother is something that a lot of women don't seem to develop. And I think that when we talk about like this woman who wanted to be presented as a trophy wife, finally chosen by a great guy who's taking care of her and her kids and doing all this, and they're having new babies, and she was not did she was not diligent enough to know who the hell she invited in around her children. If I found myself single tomorrow and my partner and I aren't together anymore, I ain't fucking with no man. I'm sorry. I'm not even interested. I'm fine with that. I don't want anybody around me or my children. It's just too dangerous. I don't have the energy to decipher and do those things. Maybe when I was in my 20s, okay, but now, no. I just wouldn't bother. And I think that knowing who I am as a parent and a mother also helps me understand that choice and that decision. I also think that our social structure holds responsibility for us always wanting to see someone's perfect life. People want to present these perfect ideal lives to the world, especially as women who have been told they're not enough or they're too much or they're somehow unchoosable, right? There's a man arguing with me in one of my videos about how Black women are the least this, that, and the other on dating sites, which we all hear in these podcasts from podcast bros and blah. And I'm going to say it to you, when I tried to do a dating site when I was in the States, I don't know how many people get like I don't know what the threshold is, but I never reached out to anybody and I had hundreds of messages regularly. So I don't think that these ideas, this data that people want to talk about is real, but women believe it. Women believe so much of what we tell them is wrong with them, what we tell them isn't good enough, how we shape women and girls from a very young age matters. And this woman was already shaping her children because and one of the reasons I do not really show my kids on my social media. When I first started, everybody was like, you got to put your kids on, you got to put your kids on. I did not want to have them performing for people little modules of life for consumption that are probably not true. So this content to me, when you are putting your family and your children and you're scripting them for camera and you're showing them maybe like I don't know if they kids watch these themselves or whatever, but you're creating these little fake lives for them and this disassociation and detachment that they're starting to grow and to develop into because you have to be somewhat detached to put shit on the internet, right? Because people are going to judge, people are going to say what they're going to say, and if you're putting your kids out there, the same thing is going to happen, right? I posted one video of my son once like on TikTok that I thought was just funny. Oh, it almost went viral. I had to take it down because the pedos came out of the pedos just came out of the woodworks. And it's something that I just thought was a cute, innocent video about a little boy trying to be funny because, life. And I'm not even going to say what it was, but it was just disgusting how many people, particularly men, were in those comments making all kinds of. I can't. I mean, so the way I actually discovered that this guy was a sexual predator was another friend of mine that I was still friends with. I don't know how, but she found an article and it was from Africa that this man, his picture was right there, was trafficking children and he had been caught or something and everything. And I had to sit back and gasp because I was just like, this man was likely talking to me because he knew I had a kid, because he knew I had a young son. And when I think about that, the fear and the disgust and the pain in me that I was even talking to this man. It never got to the point where he could have met him, but just even talking to this man. So I can't imagine myself, even though I know story after story of women who turn a blind eye. And I want to say this is the next layer of it because a lot of people pretend that they don't know. They ignore signs, they ignore little things that are just not okay with your children because it's family, it's a friend, it's this, that, and the other. And they've groomed you in some sort of way as well to let this happen to your child, to not be protective or pay attention to signs. A 2 and 4 year old, a 2 year old and a 4 year old are showing other outward signs of abuse when they're in these situations and you're not paying attention. If you're not, if you don't, if you're not, if you're your child's mother, if you're there and you know your kid, you're just not paying attention. Everything that my kids do and feel that's strange, I'm evaluating. I'm like, why is that? And it's partially because I'm in Italy, maybe, and I know there's a lot of shit in the game here. And I'm not talking about sexual predators. We don't go to church, but um, just racism and all kinds of things like society bullshit. So I am overly. overly aware of little changes in them about absolutely anything. And most of the time, it's been nothing, but I want to know. We're going to discuss this. So, 2 year olds and 4 year olds, they show signs. And even if they can't verbalize that, you know something is different before you have to see it physically in your kid. And you might not want to know it, but we've always, I don't know, most, especially Black folks, I would say most people had that cousin or uncle or somebody in the family that everybody's like, no, you can't be alone with them. If you find yourself in the room by themselves with you, scream and run out. Like, I mean, I know so many families like that. That's the turning the blind eye. Everybody knows it's a thing. Everybody knows what this person is capable of, and they just let me do it. The children become responsible to avoid him and run out of a room or just not be in a room, or you get in trouble if I catch you in a space with this person. Why is that person allowed in that space? So, every situation that I've ever heard or understood, the women were active participants in their child's abuse, especially when it's been in the home. They either pretended they didn't know it was possible or happened or didn't pay attention to their children, or they put their children around people that they don't know, especially pick me women. They are the most dangerous women to other women, to children, period. They will allow their children to be killed, molested, whatever, for a man. The woman whose husband left their infant daughter in a car and she suffocated for hours, he left her there. She was the first one to defend him in court. She is complacent and compliant, and she knew he had been doing this to the kids, and she had asked him not to do it, and she still stayed and left her kids with this man and pretended in some wild way that he was not going to eventually unalive her children. She didn't want them kids. That's the way I see it. And every situation that I've heard more of a story about, the women somehow were complacent in something. This woman, I don't know her and I'm not judging her, but the fact that she allowed a man she didn't know around her sons was already a problem and a red flag. Proposing to this man, a red flag. All of the red flags that she did as a pick me led to this situation where her daughters were abused. And now I think that when we start talking about the fact that this is also content, right? Content that's gone viral, content that is making her money, right? She's running up the RPMs. That's why I'm not putting clips or anything in this video, because I don't want to participate in that. But I do want to think that having these conversations are important when so many single mothers put themselves and their children at risk with abusive men. And in situations where these children are already being groomed, not only by their father, but by their mother in the sense of content and creating a false narrative for her, for the life they live, and everything that is being consumed by us, only sets your children up for more and more failure. When I still think about finding out that someone actually who is a sexual predator targeted me at some point in my life because I had a kid, I still am not okay. Um just knowing how like, just because if you're next to me, you're too close. I don't care if you never showed up in my house. If you were next to me, you're too close. And it's just disturbing, and I know that I am not lucky because I had boundaries and I had rules of engagement that I stood by. So that is not luck. That is intention. Guys, subscribe to my channel and I look forward to talking to you guys in the comments. Ciao for now.